How can we keep from singing? This excerpt is from the book To Wake to Rise, which is a Unitarian Universalist reflections from a variety of ministers and different lay people and leaders in our movement. And this one comes from Natalie Maxwell Fenimore, an excerpt from Welcome and Listen. Though you have broken your vows 1,000 times, come, yet again come. These words of Rumi speak to the welcome that is at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. We seek to be a home for all who desire our company. We seek to make a welcome for all those in search of our good news. Come, come, little children, teens, young adults, and elders. Come, families in great diversity. Come to this loving home and safe harbor, but not to find a place to escape the world. This is a community of engagement and of creativity. We come together to create boldly and dangerously. We must create the beloved community with an awareness of how difficult it is, because it is hard. It's work that challenges us to bring our whole selves and engage deeply and for the long haul. Our faith, our tradition must call us into community. Our task is to create spaces where we might know and value each other. When we welcome all our stories into the DNA of our faith, we add value and richness and depth. The inclusion of my story and all your stories expands the vision of who we are and what we can become. To be the beloved community, we must know that we care for each other as beloveds, not merely in the abstract, but in the particular and in the personal. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving. Can we share our stories of pain and joy, memory and hope? Can we be beloved to each other? Our ears are open to hear each other's voices, our eyes ready to see each other clearly, our hearts enlarged to hold each other's pain and joy, our arms entwined in embrace as we journey. Don't give up and don't stop listening to one another.
Good morning, I'm Charlotte Jones-Carroll. I've been coming 30 years here, but I decided to cover the social justice history that I would go back to 60 years to our founding, drawing on the 40th anniversary history that Joan Zenzen and others did. So don't worry, I'll do it in 5 minutes. But I just wanted you to know, we have a rich history of social justice work in this congregation. A social action committee was established shortly after our founding in 1961, and under slightly different names, social concern, social responsibility, social justice. It's evolved over the years. Today, there's a social justice ministry team. Initially, the Social Action Committee supported lively advocacy for desegregation, affordable housing, women's reproductive rights, the Poor People's Campaign, the original one, gun control, always a problem, environmental measures, daycare and tutoring for the nearby communities of color. Yeah, our daycare got started that way. A monthly social issues forum also began, still going on. And the committee was entrusted by the board with allocating budgeted social justice funds. A decade later, there was widening interest in social action and community service. So the Social Action Fellowship created task forces. The first ones were environment, political action and legislation, education, and peace. But others soon followed. There was women's rights, there were refugees, a refugee task force, there was a food fund. The congregation marched for the Equal Rights Amendment. We may be marching again. It sponsored a Vietnamese refugee couple. I didn't know until I actually read that. and raised awareness about nuclear arms. We joined UU and interfaith networks, and we sent donations to local nonprofits. In 1975, a new and fairly unique funding approach began where members could pledge for social justice outreach at the same time as we pledge for our operations. Funds available for distribution for good causes just rose dramatically. In 1983, the Refugee Subcommittee morphed into the Sanctuary Task Force because there was a burgeoning Central American community fleeing civil unrest in that area. When this committee proposed that River Road become a physical sanctuary, an idea strongly supported by Minister Bill Murray, the initiative proved divisive. Though it was embraced by many, sanctuary was vociferously opposed by others that didn't want River Road to get involved in political actions with possible legal consequences. Reverend Murray mediated these tensions until a palatable compromise was found. But the conflict left lasting marks on social justice work here. I feel the congregation has been wary ever since I've come of acting publicly on social justice issues as a full congregation. While other UU congregations carried their church banners to protest rallies, River Road folks had to make do with a social justice banner, which I think has now been lost. And I think you know the Black Lives Matter sign out front has to have the Racial Justice Task Force banner attached to it. But lots of other exciting things were happening in the late 1980s. Reverend Murray preached a memorable sermon on MLK Sunday in 1988. He confessed, "I am a racist." And then he followed up to explore racism with members of the church. After that, the result was two more task forces, an affordable housing and racial justice task force. So there's one of our most important ones, two of our most important ones founded. Another success in the early 90s was the vote to become a welcoming congregation for the LGBTQ community. River Road began also around this time, 80s and 90s, what became decades-long partnerships with 6 groups. Our partner church in Fiat-Falva, sorry, I'm going through all these lists, but there's such a rich history. The Salvadoran village of Santa Marta, Beacon House and La Clinica, the local minority college scholarship funds, and Shepherd's Table. These groups are not just beneficiaries of our financial outreach funds. They're true partners. We show up as volunteers and allies. Other task forces came and went. Health, children's rights, Middle East, Action in Montgomery. Yes, we had a 90s version, and now we have a 2010 version. And economic justice. Animal rights was more recently formed, and the Immigration Justice Committee has been formed, and we co-sponsored another refugee family. Sometimes there were a dozen active task forces offering diverse opportunities for engagement. We've been especially proud of our financial outreach. Astoundingly, by 2014, our unique social justice pledging system was averaging about $70,000 a year for 7 or 8 designated organizations, and another $20,000 to be allocated to smaller projects by the Social Justice Council. One of my favorite aspects, because when we came here, we brought our daughter, was River Road's social justice work integration into RE and youth programs. Our River Road youth have traveled to the South to rebuild churches that were burned down. They marched for AIDS awareness. They traveled so many times to Santa Marta, El Salvador, to learn what Central American life was after conflict. And in 1999, we chaperoned 40 youth to a peace conference in The Hague. These experiences, I know, have been transformative for some youth, leading them to careers of service and advocacy. The financial side was modified recently to replace outreach pledging with monthly extend the offerings, more like other UU congregations. I think this has provided new opportunities for the benefiting organizations to highlight their programs in a much more interactive way. So our vibrant history really has always attracted and retained justice-seeking people to River Road. A few people have left over the years, either because they found us too wimpy or too radical. But on balance, we've been an exciting place that still serves as a base of operations, to quote the late Susan Kanoy, for doing social justice work in community.
Good morning. My name is John Kerner, and thank you, Reverend Amanda, for inviting Charlotte and I to be part of this Social Justice Sunday service with you. Addressing the question of from where do we come, I will briefly reflect on my own racial social justice journey before sharing my thoughts about how we at River Road are collectively building new pathways towards racial justice. The seeds of my personal and professional commitment to racial and social justice were sown through a transformational summer teen citizenship education program I attended in 1965. As a 15-year-old, I boarded a Trailways bus with 20 other worried, white, and well-off in campers from New York and New Jersey for a 3-day trip across the country to Berkeley, California, to attend a 6-week encampment for citizenship program. What made this such a transformational experience? Over 70% of our program was made up of 15 to 18-year-olds from communities of color, many of whom were supported by U.S. Office of Economic Opportunity scholarships. No one was turned away because their parents' inability to pay. My roommates were an African American from Philadelphia and the son of a Mexican American migrant worker from Southern California. Through our shared experiences of workshops and weekend field trips, for example, picking strawberries in the Central Valley of California while meeting Cesar Chavez while he was organizing the United Farm Workers, I learned to see our world very differently. I also learned to see myself differently through my roommate's eyes, which was on occasion pretty painful. For the next 50 years, through high school and university summer jobs, through graduate school internships, and in my professional career, I sought out new and different communities, and in particular, communities of color with whom to be in relationship. I learned to see myself and my privilege in relation to these different community contexts, while trying but not always succeeding to resist any latent defensiveness when those images were less than flattering. So contemplating retirement after a 40-year professional career, I wondered, where would I find new opportunities for being in community towards racial justice, growth, and change? Transformational for me, and I suspect for others who joined me here at River Road, was the congregational trip led by Reverend Nancy in March 2015 to the 50th anniversary of the Selma March over the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the UUA Racial Justice Education Program in Birmingham, Alabama. Our Racial Justice Foundation was then, as Charlotte said, and is now, the Racial Justice Task Force. In addition to educational program, members of our congregation through this task force have long provided financial and volunteer support, partnering with programs like College Bound, Mentors Inc., and Beacon House. More recently, hundreds of you shared your views in 2017 of what racial justice means through our Racial Justice Survey. The survey analysis and a concept map identified a number of shared racial justice priorities that we as a congregation value. In addition to this task force, we have a nascent community of about 50 of us who have participated in the Beloved Conversations curriculum. Task force members, Beloved Conversations alums, and interested staff work together to translate our congregational concept map of racial justice priorities into 6 new pathways: actions for justice, educating for change, engaging communities, pathways for families, supporting educational access, and witnessing for justice. Our pathway co-leads, working with their members and together through the task force are building communities of racial justice practice via these 6 pathways. So who are we? May I ask, if you're willing and able, any of our pathway co-leads and members present this morning to please stand. Thank you. May I also ask any alums of the beloved Conversations program present this morning to please stand. Thank you. To me, we reflect a growing racial justice lay community here at River Road. There are, of course, many others of you who are actively engaged with communities of color through our diverse and very important social justice groups that Charlotte talked about: AIM, the Immigration and Refugees Committee, Prevent Gun Violence Ministry, and others. In closing, please accept my apologies for adding 2 additional questions to Reverend Amanda's for your consideration. First, how do other communities see us differently than we see ourselves? And second, what can we accomplish collectively in relationship with other communities that cannot be accomplished individually on our own? I invite you to visit our Racial Justice Task Force table after this service to learn more about the pathways and how we are working together. For example, to get out the vote in 2020. Thank you.
What a beautiful tapestry that we weave here at River Road. What an amazing legacy for me to come into here in my 2nd year, coming to this vibrant community. And I want to piggyback off of what John was inviting us into. And I want to invite anyone who has participated in social justice efforts of the past or of the present, whether that was an event or a committee or a one-time thing or something that you did in the community on behalf of River Road. I want to invite you to stand and make yourself known and present so that we can appreciate and acknowledge you. I view congregational life like a learning lab of sorts, a place where we come to engage and explore what it means to live into our values and to do the work of creating this world that we want to live in. And our stories are essential to that. And these aren't stories of one-time acts of social justice. These are stories of the power of the collective, a power of this community, the ways we make space for each other in this world around us. The ways that River Road shapes our hearts and our lives. And so in this exercise of exploring what makes us who we are, I find myself not looking to the future, but I look back at my own UU journey. The first time I walked into a Unitarian Universalist church, I was right out of college. Many of you know I grew up Southern Baptist, and I had since rejected a theology of a God that would send me to hell. But I still had a place for the divine in my heart. And really what I know now is that I needed to be in faithful community. Now, I didn't know a thing about UUs. I didn't know about the politics or social justice. I didn't know any of what I know now. I could not have articulated then. I didn't know a thing about our history. I didn't know a thing about our struggles as UUs. When I say I was a blank slate, I'm for real. And when I sat in that pew, and I heard Spirit of Life for the first time, when I witnessed people building a shared altar, not to atone for their sins, when I heard contemporary music in church, when I found a sense of belonging, I did not leave that service feeling guilty or broken. I felt like I was worthy of a relationship with the Spirit. I felt like a child who had been adopted at an early age, finding a home they never knew they had. I felt a knowing a knowing that gave me permission to belong in that congregation, that sustained me through my calling into ministry, and a knowing that has carried me to this day, to this place, in this community. I don't know what liberation looks like. I don't know what social justice is becoming in our lives and in our world. I don't know how we're going to be asked to step up to the plate. I don't know what liberation will become, but I know what liberation feels like. It feels like belonging here. It feels like belonging to this faith. It feels like belonging to each other, to this moment and this community. What a blessing and what an honor it is to be counted among you all, to be here learning and growing and living and being in this precious, important time in the history of our world. What a blessing and what an honor and what a sacred responsibility. May it always be so. May we flow in that river that carries us from the past to the present to the future. May we know that it is a circle that never begins and never really ends. And we pass the torch to one another in small ways and in big ways in our lives every single time we come here. We're holding and we're releasing, and it's a sacred motion and a sacred flow. May it always be abundantly so. Blessed be.